Hey everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Samantha. Here we talk about different elements around human fulfillment, identity, confidence, connections, human connection, relationships, etc., and mindset also, and activism. And today I want to talk about the importance of getting outside of your comfort zone, especially if you're a woman, especially if you're a woman of color, a daughter of immigrants who grew up very sheltered like I did. So a few days ago, Today's Tuesday night. I went to this adult book fair on Saturday, not adult book fair meaning like spicy, but I mean a book fair for adults. And I had such a great time there. And that did require me getting outside of my comfort zone because I am usually really scared to drive in Dallas traffic. It just requires a lot of energy. And Dallas traffic, especially on the weekends, is something else. Yeah, but anyway, I ended up being brave and going there and just shaking up my routine a bit, not going to the coffee shop I'm really attached to going to a lot of times on my days off or before I have work at the bookstore I work at. And I am so glad I went. It did feel a little bit awkward at first because it's been a while since I've socialized in a really big group because there were a lot of people there, which is awesome. There were a lot of vendors there. And I just had such a great time talking to different people, even when I did experience bouts of awkwardness or even bouts of shyness. I just really loved having the in-person human connection that my soul has always craved. And it's really funny because growing up, especially, I think I was pretty social in elementary school, but if you've watched my other videos, you know that around middle school and high school, I did not have that many friends. I was pretty socially awkward. I was pretty shy. Back in high school, I really thought I was super introverted and that I just didn't relate to a lot of people. But then when I went to college and I was surrounded by so many different kinds of people, so much more diversity than the super white conservative town that I grew up in, I realized that it wasn't that I wasn't social. It wasn't that I was super introverted and just didn't like being around people. I loved being around people. I just didn't have the kinds of people that I felt safe to be myself around. I just didn't have the environment where I felt safe to be around either, because even at home, I didn't feel safe to be myself. I didn't really connect with my parents like that, especially as I started to grow into my own person that defied the expectations that they had for who I was supposed to be. But I can talk about that later, and I definitely will in a different video because there's just so much to unpack with that I know a lot of other South Asian women can relate to, or just other daughters of immigrants too, perhaps from different cultures and backgrounds. Going back to getting outside of your comfort zone, it is so incredibly important. Growing up, I was very sheltered. It's interesting because I was both infantilized by my parents and also parentified in other ways. For example, I was infantilized when I expressed that I wanted to be a writer or be something that was not a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer. And again, if you are an adult child of Desi immigrants, you totally know what I'm talking about. Parents just made me feel like there was something wrong with me for not agreeing to the kind of lifestyle that they desired and that they ultimately desired for me. They just couldn't really fathom that there were other paths to success that didn't fit their expectations. I think also in infantilizing me, they kind of had me internalize that I was always a child, that I was incompetent, that I wasn't capable enough of thinking for myself. This led to a lot of self-doubt in several areas of my life, and it didn't help that while I was socially awkward at school or just didn't have a lot of friends at school, I doubted my ability to connect with people. In general, I was just very scared of taking up space. I felt like I wasn't worthy of it. Internally, I just really didn't feel good about myself. And when you don't feel good about yourself, you really have to program your mind. And sometimes I say program your mind a lot, but I think it really goes more than that. It's more than just seeing yourself as a robot, because you're a human being at the end of the day, a dynamic, multifaceted person who has so much potential. It might be more empowering and more in alignment to me to use the words. You really have to change your mindset. You really have to change your self-perception. You really have to teach yourself to see your worth and uncover the shame and guilt and whatever else has been holding you back from really understanding your value and how deserving you are of good things and of venturing out and really understanding that you're worthy of new experiences. You're worthy of not being so certain all the time. For so many of us, daughters of immigrants, you're taught this end all or be all mentality where we're not allowed to make mistakes, where we're also blamed too much for when things do go wrong, for things that are outside of our control. We're also taught to take so much responsibility for other people's feelings over how they're perceiving us. We're told not to shine too bright. We're told to keep our voices out so that we don't trigger our parents, a lot of times our dads, because when they see that we have a certain level of intellect that challenges their worldview, they start to perceive that as disrespect when you're really not being disrespectful. A huge topic in this video that I want to talk about is when we over-intellectualize our feelings, but more specifically, when we over-intellectualize our pleasure. I've seen a lot of discussion online that has been helpful, where people talk about how it's not healthy to over-intellectualize your emotions when it pertains to painful, uncomfortable emotions. For example, if you're processing a breakup, or if you're processing another kind of grief, or we're just feeling sad, like really sad about a life change or a life event. But I haven't seen a lot of discussion about how too many of us, especially women, over-intellectualize our pleasure because we're taught that it's not safe to directly experience it. For example, for me, I think I would try to escape through books and movies and TV shows. I wasn't trying to be lazy. Truly, now that I'm looking at my 16-year-old self as my 26-year-old self, I realized that I was craving the pleasure and also the need of human connection. I didn't have friends of my own. I also didn't have romance in my life, which I still lack that in my life, but I can talk about that later. And so I was craving these very normal human desires through the books and TV shows I would entertain. Because in real life, I felt like I wasn't allowed to make time for those things. I had internalized this idea that I had to normalize the grind. I never felt good enough for pleasure, for just being. I felt like I always had to do and hustle. I was trying to fulfill this persona to please my parents, that I was this hardworking, good girl who spent most of her time at her desk and forfeited having fun, or had some level of guilt around having fun and leisure and self-expression. I had really internalized the idea that I wasn't worthy of being present with any creative endeavors, and that whenever I did any kind of extracurricular activity, it had to be done to impress colleges because it would make my resume look impressive. I can't even begin to tell you the toll this took on my mental health, on my self-esteem, and just the inherent loneliness it created in me. The amount of disconnection, because disconnection creates loneliness, it creates depression. It just makes a very lackluster life. And because I tried to over-intellectualize my pleasure, I tried to experience it secondhand rather than directly, I ultimately learned that pleasure wasn't safe for me, or that if I was pursuing pleasure, especially without the permission and validation of my parents, then I was doing something wrong. And I can see how that shows up whenever I'm filming videos like these, because I'm very excited and passionate about public speaking and making videos where I'm expressing myself and sharing bits and pieces of self-development inspiration that are going to help other people and help me connect with other people. But when I'm doing this or other creative self-expressive stuff, I often experience a lot of brain fog, and I have experience with this video too. I'm probably gonna have those parts cut out. I was too focused on how I could impress others rather than on how I could live authentically, because I kept feeling like I wasn't allowed to enjoy my life until I was good enough. And I only felt like I was good enough, or that I would be good enough, once I achieved the things that my parents wanted me to achieve, that I internalized that I wanted to achieve. But I never had an authentic enough why, because I wanted to achieve these things because they would have made me look impressive, because they were good. But what did that actually mean? If I got into Harvard, what did that actually mean about me besides that I was smart? Smart for what purpose? If I became a doctor because that was impressive and that was good and it would make my parents happy, what did that actually mean again? And like, for what purpose? Because I knew I had that purpose of wanting to help people, but why would I want to help people with that specifically when I wasn't passionate about being in the medical field, especially when there were other ways to help people too, that wouldn't require me choosing a path where I had to suppress my own desires that excited me personally. I wasn't allowed to date, so I tried to experience romance through books that had romance in it. Not having that many friends, and also unconsciously, I feel like out of loyalty to my parents, internalized that I wasn't allowed to have friends because that would be betraying and distracting me from achieving the goals that my parents wanted me to. In order to make up for that loneliness of not having friends, of not being able to express myself, I watched TV shows where there were friend groups that laughed together, experienced ups and downs together. There was also this idea that I had to have everything figured out in my life, so I wasn't really allowed to be present on the journey because, first of all, I was so scared. Like, I was so scared I would mess something up, that any action I would take would be super life determining. Like, not making an A on an assignment meant I was a bad student. If I got a B in a class, that was the end of the world because I would not get into an Ivy League. There was just so much pressure to get it right. So even for the things that I just wanted to enjoy in and of itself, there's still that pressure, like, oh my God, it has to be so good. Because there was so much pressure on not making mistakes, there was this idea that because I'm so privileged compared to my parents, that means that I have to be exceptional. If I'm not exceptional, it's because there must be something wrong with me, or because I'm being lazy or not trying hard enough or not trying smart enough. It was so debilitating for me to try things at all. Pressure really takes fun out of things, even if those things that you're pursuing are things that you enjoy just for yourself. Going to that book fair event this weekend, it was definitely something that helped me deepen my self-trust, because even as an adult, sometimes I still have this idea that I have not earned the right to do something fun outside of my comfort zone. And I also usually cut these parts out, but I do want to show you guys. Right now I'm experiencing brain fog and it really sucks, but I know it's gonna be okay. Before, there was this idea that over the past 2 years, I've worked really hard to overcome, where I felt like I'm not allowed to enjoy my life until I have my life together. But no one has their life together 100%. And even as you're on the journey to getting your life together, you're still worthy of joy. You're still worthy of loving yourself. You're still worthy of human connection. And a lot of times it's those things that we feel like we're not worthy of on the journey that help us get to the destination where we want to be. For example, human connection is a huge thing. You need human connection to thrive. You can't thrive through loneliness. Maybe to an extent you could thrive on your own alone, and we all need to have that foundation of self-trust, self-accountability. Part of that self-accountability means allowing yourself to have a social life, putting yourself out there to connect and mingle with people and to learn from them hands-on. And hands-on learning is a huge thing. So many South Asian women, daughters of immigrants, have been discouraged from by their parents because by making mistakes, that means we could bring shame upon our family. It means we could ruin their reputation. There's so much shame around not being perfect and not being exceptional. Again, experiencing the brain fog as I'm talking about this. In real time, you guys can see this. It can be really hard talking about this stuff sometimes because it just brings so much stuff up. It is not enough to learn things by proxy. It is not enough for your parents to tell you lessons they've learned for many things. Not enough for your parents to tell you that life is supposed to be like this, that this is right, this is wrong. It is so important that you explore and experience that for yourself hands-on. And I also want to mention that life is so boring and your identity is so static when you are attached to being perfect. Because what happens when you're perfect? Let's say you are perfect and everything's handed to you. Where are you gonna have growth? Where are you gonna have things to be proud of when everything just comes easily to you? And when you aim for perfectionism, you are also susceptible to arrogance because you have this idea that you should know everything. That causes you to be closed-minded because you feel insecure when you don't know something, and when you acknowledge that for yourself, and instead of learning from other people and being inspired by them, you end up having this attitude of, oh, I already know this. Oh, I'm feeling jealous of this. And I've been there. Like, I felt jealous seeing people talking about things that I'm passionate about or wanted to be more knowledgeable in, because internally I felt shame and guilt for not allowing myself to put in the work to grow because I'd been so debilitated by shame. It's when I opened my mind to learning from other people that I was able to give myself permission to have my own beautiful, messy journey, to express myself unabashedly, even though it's imperfect. You have to let yourself be imperfect, okay? Like, how else are you going to get better at anything? How else are you gonna have the satisfaction of growth if you have nothing to grow from? And it's so beautiful also not staying the same version of yourself the entire time. Like, I'm so proud of myself at 26 for being so much more matured and for having so much more embodiment of the kinds of values that I desired from years ago that I had trouble doing 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and then especially 10 years ago. I have something to be proud of. I went through a lot the past 10 years, especially the past 5 years, and then the past 2 years. Like, there was a lot. And I had to muster a lot of courage and bravery. I really had to prioritize my authenticity and genuineness. And I had to do these things hands-on. I had to do really hard things, but I'm so glad I did them. And while my heart breaks for that younger version of myself, I am so grateful for the lessons I learned. And I'm grateful even for the mistakes I made that were out of touch with my authenticity, or that I needed to make in order to understand how to actually embody my values and not just talk about them. Because it's one thing to talk about your values and what's important to you, and you might be intentional and genuine about them, but there's so many instances where you're going to have to learn, where while you know something, you won't fully know it and know how to embody it until you take risks and go out into the world as you try to embody them. As I mentioned, human connection was a huge thing that I tried to over-intellectualize, such as through books and movies again. But it's not enough to do that. It is so important that you go out into the world and put an effort to go to events. Especially with the privilege we have now with social media and the internet, you can find out about different community events catered to your interests. For example, the book event I found out about through social media from a friend that I made at a coffee shop I go to. And how did I make this friend who has brought so much value into my life and helped me get to know myself better? By being brave and courageous and open to meeting new people, to taking the initiative to strike conversations up with strangers. This doesn't mean that every single stranger you're gonna strike a convo with is gonna become a close friend, but it's a numbers game. You have to have a detached approach when meeting people. And I'm gonna talk about relationships in another video too, because it is so important that you're selective about who you get close to while still maintaining your sociable self for your own good. You have got to let yourself not be perfect, okay? Even if that version of you is going to disappoint your parents, which maybe they might know about it, maybe they don't have to know about it, you have to actually try. You are so worthy of actually experiencing human connection with another human being and not just escaping through books. You are so worthy of experiencing romance in your own life. And again, not just through books or not just through your imagination. I know with romance, if you're a straight woman, I know that is easier said than done. And I will talk about that in the future. I know I've been mentioning a lot of other videos and ideas I'm going to talk about in the future, but I'm just so passionate and so excited to talk about different things. So if any of those sound like anything that you might want to listen in on, go ahead and subscribe. I'd love to grow my channel and I'd love to throw more of my ideas at you. And you also deserve to go after your own dreams, like in terms of your career, in terms of your creative dreams, creating community. Quickly, I also want to mention celebrity culture and how that distances you as an individual from yourself when you get overly hung up on a celebrity. I'm not saying that it's totally wrong to be a fan of someone. However, it becomes toxic real quick when you start to idolize these celebrities. And I see this happening so much. I see this happening with Taylor Swift. And don't even get me started with the Kardashians and also with influencers. Like, I feel like it's so disrespectful to yourself when you become obsessed with a celebrity, because you know what happens? These public figures create parasocial relationships with you where you latch onto them and you kind of create an identity and being a fan of them because you want to associate with the traits and the values they embody, or at least their image embodies, because you yourself are not honoring yourself and valuing yourself and committing to yourself enough to go after your own dreams. Here's what I mean by this. These celebrities and influencers are expressing themselves in some way, right? For example, there could be a musician, there could be an artist, an actress, a YouTuber, someone who likes to share intellectual thoughts or funny videos, but inside you have a desire to express yourself. And because you're not giving yourself that desire by latching on to being a fan of these public figures, you in a sense are living vicariously through them. In a sense, you are trying to be them. You are trying to be what they embody, but you deserve better than that. You deserve to directly express yourself. You deserve to go after your own dreams instead of being a devalued audience member, a devalued fan who these public figures see as numbers rather than as people. And for a lot of us South Asian women, again, who were taught that we're not allowed to go after our own dreams, especially when they don't fulfill our parents' desires for us, we might end up in this trap. But again, we deserve better. Again, that requires you getting outside your comfort zone, advocating for yourself, advocating for your long-term contentment over short-term happiness. And I also want to mention and leave you with this thought that peace is more important than your comfort zone. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope it helped. If something resonated with you, please let me know in the comments. And again, remember to subscribe if you want to see more thoughts like this, and I'll see you next time.